My husband tried to replace me with his secretary. Then I demoted him to a janitor. I walked into the boardroom that morning with coffee in my hand and a grateful heart. I had planned a small surprise, new charts, a fresh plan, a quiet word about payroll. Instead, the room felt cold and strange. My husband sat at the head of the long table. He smiled like a man who owned everything. Beside him, in a bright blouse and 2 white teeth, sat Lena, the secretary who had learned my routines. My chair was gone. Papers were arranged where I always placed mine. He introduced her as his new executive partner. The room clapped politely while I stood frozen. I felt a hot, small thing pop inside my chest. My name, Grace, sounded small in my ears as he explained I would be stepping back for my health. Whispers raced like ants across the carpet. I forced a smile that broke inside. I smelled betrayal and old coffee. If you love a good, true revenge story, hit subscribe for more. This was only the first cut. They spoke of fresh energy like it was perfume. He stood and painted a new chart on the screen. The employees watched with slow mouths. He said I needed rest and less stress. People nodded and looked at me like I was fragile glass. My hands held my purse so tight that a seam dug into my palm. I forced a smile and sat as if the room could not see the fracture inside me. Lena laughed softly at a private joke. The staff asked polite questions about the transition. Someone said, "We all support you, Grace," with eyes that avoided mine. I felt small like an old photograph left in the rain. I heard my own name whispered with pity. After the meeting, I walked through the rows of desks and felt fingers glance at me like paper cuts. My husband watched me go with a look that said he had replaced me. I swallowed bile and walked out of the building with my head high. That night, he said it like a fact. We sat in our quiet kitchen, light over the sink, and he folded his hands as if closing a business deal. "You've had your time," he said calmly. His voice was even, like the voice of the man who had sold me small dreams for big ones. He told me the company needed fresh leadership, new ideas, and a lighter house at home. He said it as if love was a thing to be updated like software. I felt the room tilt. My years of waking early and working late were invisible now. He told me that I could take time away and travel, that I could enjoy my grandchildren without constant worry. He smiled like a man who had already practiced his lines. I heard the secretary's name again, like an insult. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and false calm. I left the table and walked to the bedroom, pretending not to hear the quiet closing of a door that pushed me out. I went back in time in my head to the first day we started the little cleaning business in our garage. We had 2 old buckets, a mop with a frayed handle, and toothless hope. He said he had marketing ideas. I handled clients, drove contracts, and learned how to fix a broken vacuum. I met customers, took calls, and stayed late to wash floors until my hands ached. I learned how to tape neat signs to a dusty truck. We had no money, but we had plans drawn on notebook paper. I painted our first logo with trembling hands and watched him stand on the porch talking to strangers like he owned the sun. I carried the work like a quiet, heavy blessing. When money came, I counted it in jars and tucked receipts in a box. He once told me I made him look good. I believed him then. Now I remembered the cold way he took credit at the ribbon cutting while I stood behind him, hands still stained with soap. Lena's feed was small and bright on my phone. She posted a picture of herself at a ribbon cutting with my husband, smiling with champagne. The caption read, "Hard work pays off when the right people notice." Comments bloomed like careless flowers. People asked about the new structure and called her inspiring. I felt something break in my chest. I watched the picture again and again as if proof could be rewound. I knew the times she had been present in meetings and how she laughed at things that were not funny. I recalled her voice on the phone, learning the names of our clients, like a spy. My hands shook as I scrolled through her older posts and saw small signals, lunches with managers, selfies at the office desk, tagged photos with my husband. The salt of betrayal burned my eyes. I pocketed my phone and walked to the garage where the first mop lived, whispering to the past like a prayer. I would not let the picture be the last word. I found the paper on a Friday morning. It sat on the corner of my desk like a dead bird. At first, I did not understand why my name looked strange at the top. Then I saw the signature, my own copied in a style I knew too well. It was a resignation letter. It said I wanted to step down with gratitude. My husband had already filed it. I held the paper with both hands so it would not shake. I walked down the hall and heard people whisper about the change. I stood in my office doorway, breathing slowly, fighting the urge to scream. Someone had packed my family photos in a box. My chair was pulled away from the desk like I had already left. I knew then he was not only replacing me at work, he was removing me from my own story. Hit subscribe if you want more stories where justice comes slow, but hits hard. My lawyer, a quiet man with kind eyes, read the paperwork twice. Then he sat back and rubbed his face. "Grace, this is strange," he said. He showed me the page where it stated my ownership. I still held 51%. That meant the company was still mine, at least on paper. But then he showed me the next stack, fake transfers to small subsidiary companies I had never heard of. All signed by my husband. All dated on days I had been out of the office. "He diluted your power," the lawyer said softly. "These transfers make it look like you agreed to share control." My throat tightened. He had been planning this for months. Years maybe. The lawyer asked if I wanted to fight. I nodded. I felt old but sharp again. A blade does not forget how to cut. I left his office with a folder under my arm and fire in my chest. He had started a war. When I arrived at work the next morning, my badge beeped red. The guard looked at me with wide eyes, as if I were a stranger. "It's not working," he said awkwardly. I tried again. Red. Again. Red. I climbed the stairs anyway, but my office door was closed. Locked. And there she was, Lena, standing inside my space, leaning on my old desk like a cat stretching in sunlight. She smirked when she saw me. "The boss says you can't be here today," she said. "Or at all." My chest filled with heat. She touched my old chair, as if it belonged to her. She even pointed to the box of my things. "Don't worry," she said. "We saved everything important." She meant nothing. I picked up the box and walked out slowly. Every step echoed down the hall, loud, strong. They thought they had pushed me out, but they did not know me yet. I walked past every cubicle with my head high, though my heart felt like shattered glass. People watched me from the corners of their eyes. Some looked sad, some confused, some afraid to be seen caring. I kept walking. I held the box tight against my chest, hearing the small rattle of a picture frame inside. At the elevator, I breathed in deep. I refused to cry in front of them. Outside, the sun was bright, too bright for a day like this. Cars rushed by, unaware my world had cracked open. I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. My hands were steady, but my voice shook when I whispered to myself, "They think this is the end." I drove home slowly, each mile building a storm inside me. I had been silent too long. Silence now felt like surrender. And I was not done. At home, I set the box on the table and stared at it. The logo on the old company mug looked faded and sad. I picked it up and felt the weight of every year I had given. Then I smashed it. The sound broke across the kitchen like thunder. The pieces scattered across the floor like all the years he had taken from me. I sank onto a chair and let myself cry, not soft tears, but deep, shaking ones. I said the words out loud, voice cracking. "I made you. I made that company. Now I will unmake you." The room felt still after that. Calm in a strange way. I wiped my face, stood up, and looked at myself in the mirror on the wall. My eyes were red, but my spine felt straight again. I knew what came next. Revenge was not loud or messy. It was careful. And I would be very, very careful. My old accountant, Mr. Harris, met me in a small cafe that smelled like bread and old stories. He looked tired but kind when he opened his laptop. "Grace, you need to see this," he said softly. He showed me numbers that dipped and curves that twisted the wrong way. Money had been drifting out of payroll for months and landing in strange consulting accounts accounts with names I did not know. All of them approved by my husband. The amounts were large enough to make my stomach tighten. "He's been hiding this," Mr. Harris said. "And someone else is signing off on half of these invoices." I didn't need to guess who. The truth lay like a stone in my gut. My husband had not only replaced me, he had stolen from the company we built. I felt old anger rise like a slow fire. "Keep digging," I told him, "and save everything." My voice surprised even me. It sounded like someone preparing for battle. I drove to the old warehouse on Westbrook Road, the one we bought years ago when we thought we might clean government buildings someday. The place smelled like dust and metal. I searched through boxes until my hands were gray. Then I found it, our first folder of ownership papers, stamped with my maiden name. Every early document, every signed form, every receipt was stored in that metal cabinet.
Not changed.
Not touched. My name sat on line after line as co-founder and primary owner. Tears formed, but not from sadness, from relief. Here was truth that could not be erased. I gathered everything into neat stacks and locked them in my car trunk. As I closed the warehouse door, I felt something shift inside me. I was not walking away from my company. I was walking back toward it. And I felt stronger than I had in months. I began meeting old clients quietly. Some joined me in cafes. Some invited me into their offices, with warm hugs. They all said the same thing. The company was slipping. Jobs were messy. Schedules were broken. Bills were late. They missed my steady hand. "We stayed because of you," one woman said, her eyes soft. "Not because of your husband." I heard stories of Lena acting important, giving orders she did not understand. People whispered that the company felt colder now, harsher. They said workers were leaving because morale was low. Hearing it hurt, but it also fed a secret flame inside me. My husband thought he had made a new empire, but he had built it on sand. As I drove home from one meeting, the sun sank behind the buildings, painting everything in gold. I felt hope settle on my shoulders. Quiet, heavy,
Real.
2 days later, I received a call from my old assistant, Maya. Her voice shook. "Grace, I shouldn't be calling, but you need to know what's happening." She told me Lena had been forging invoices, fake contracts, fake payment requests, fake supply orders. She even took kickbacks from vendors and blamed staff members when numbers didn't add up. Maya had proof, emails, screenshots, lists. She whispered the words like secrets she had carried too long. I closed my eyes and let the truth settle in. This was bigger than betrayal. This was fraud, and it could bury them both. "Send me everything," I said. My voice felt calm, steady. Maya hesitated. "Are you coming back?" she asked. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Yes," I said softly, "but not the way they expect." When I hung up, I felt the entire world tilt toward justice. The next morning, I saw articles online praising my husband for modernizing the brand. Reporters wrote that he brought new life into the company. They called him bold, smart, visionary. I laughed so hard tears filled my eyes, not from joy but disbelief. They praised a man standing on a sinking ship. He was polishing the outside while the inside cracked and rotted. The comments praised Lena's fresh style. People said she was the future. They had no idea what she had really done. I scrolled through picture after picture until the screen blurred. My anger settled into something sharp and simple. Let them cheer now. Let them clap and praise him. The louder the applause, the harder the fall. I turned off my phone and looked around my quiet living room. Soon, the truth would walk into the light, and I would be the one holding it. My accountant called me late that evening. His voice was low, almost excited. "Grace, you need to hear this." He played a recording from a call he'd had with my husband. I held my breath. My husband laughed on the recording and said, "She'll never fight back. Grace is too sentimental. She still thinks people are good." My hands curled into fists. Every word felt like a nail being hammered into my spine. He spoke as if I were weak, as if age had made me soft. He joked about how easy it had been to push me aside. My heart burned, but my mind felt steady. When the recording ended, I sat still for a long time, letting the words settle into my bones. Too sentimental, too trusting, too soft. He had no idea who I really was. That call did not break me. It formed the edge of the blade I needed. 2 days later, I created a new company on my laptop. I used my maiden name, the one no one in the industry remembered. Clean Core International. The name felt sharp, clean, strong. I filed every paper quickly and quietly. Then I called the best workers who had quit my old company. Men and women who trusted me, who remembered my leadership. Every single one said yes. They wanted to work with me again. They were tired of the chaos my husband had created. I rented a small office, bought simple desks, and ordered uniforms. I felt like I did in the garage all those years ago, only now I was wiser, older, and far more dangerous. As I looked at the new logo, I felt something bloom inside me. This was not just business. This was the path to take back everything he stole. And soon, he would learn what a sentimental woman could do. Our first chance came faster than I expected. A massive government cleaning contract had opened again. My old company had failed to renew it because they had missed deadlines and upset inspectors. I submitted a bid through Clean Core. My team worked day and night. When the results came in, I stared at the email for a long moment. We won. Clean Core had won the biggest contract in the region. My old company lost millions overnight. I pictured my husband reading the news, his face tightening, eyes narrowing. He would not know it was me, not yet. That made the victory sweeter. I walked around my small office, touching desks and walls like they were pieces of a dream coming back to life. The workers cheered. I let myself smile. This was the first stone in the avalanche. More would follow, each one heavier than the last. And soon the whole mountain would fall. News traveled fast in our industry. People whispered about a new cleaning company taking old Brightworks clients. They used words like mysterious, sharp, impressive, and rising fast. My husband became furious. He called emergency meetings. Staff argued in hallways. Managers panicked as contracts slipped away. Meanwhile, I met more old clients quietly. They smiled when I walked in. Some even cried.
"We thought you were gone," they said.
I told them I was building something better. Something honest. They signed with Clean Core without hesitation. My husband tried to match our prices and promises, but his company was crumbling from inside. Leaders were confused. Workers quit. And still, he had no clue I stood behind the growing storm. Every day my strength grew while his thinned. I could almost feel the moment he would realize the truth. It was coming.
Soon.
And I wanted to be there when the light hit his face. The National Trade Expo arrived, a place filled with bright lights, polished floors, and big voices. I walked in wearing a deep blue suit and calm confidence. Clean Core's booth stood tall with our new logo glowing strong. When it was my turn to speak on stage, I stepped into the spotlight. The crowd quieted. My heart beat steady. I saw him in the audience, my husband, sitting beside Lena. When the host introduced me as the founder of Clean Core International, his face froze. His mouth fell open slightly, like he had seen a ghost. Lena nudged him, whispering urgently, but he did not blink. I spoke about leadership, honesty, and rebuilding from loss. My voice filled the hall. I watched him shrink in his seat, small like a boy caught stealing. That moment tasted sweet, like the first breath after a storm. And I knew the real revenge was about to begin. After the expo, I worked quietly in the shadows. Clean Core grew fast, and Brightworks continued to slip. That was when I learned about a major shareholder, Mr. Delman, who wanted out. He owned a large block of Brightworks stock. My husband depended on that support. I met with Delman in a quiet office with soft lights and no noise. I used my maiden name again, and he didn't recognize me. He only cared that I had cash ready and a sharp plan. By the end of the meeting, the shares were mine. I signed the papers with a steady hand. I now held enough power to tip Brightworks sideways with one vote. My husband still had no idea. He thought he was fighting some young, hungry competitor. He never once suspected the woman he pushed out. The older woman he thought was too sentimental. I walked out of the building smiling. My hands shook, not with fear, but with excitement. The storm was almost ready. Monday morning arrived, and with it, the perfect chance to strike. I sent an anonymous packet to the financial authorities. Inside were records of the fake consulting accounts, payroll theft, and forged signatures. Every page pointed back to my husband. Every invoice tied to Lena. I also sent proof of the fake subsidiary transfers. The email was simple. Whistleblower report. Immediate audit recommended. By noon, Brightworks received notice of a full investigation. My husband stormed through the lobby shouting for answers. Workers whispered. Some smiled behind their hands. Lena looked pale. I watched from my small office across town as news alerts came in. Panic spread inside Brightworks like fire in dry grass. My husband called emergency meetings, but no one knew what was happening or why. They feared losing everything. I sipped my tea and whispered, "Good." The ground he stood on was cracking, and he still did not know whose hand held the hammer. Then the emails leaked. Not by accident, by design. Screenshots of messages between my husband and Lena spread online like wildfire. They joked about fake expense reports. They planned weekends together, calling them corporate retreats. They bragged about shifting money around. There were even lines where Lena called me the old broom, and my husband laughed. The internet loved the scandal. People shared the screenshots. Reporters called the company nonstop. My husband tried to deny everything, but the emails were too clear. And every time he tried to speak, another message appeared online. His perfect image cracked wide open. Lena panicked and deleted her accounts, but it was too late. The story raced ahead of her. My hands were steady as I read each leak. I didn't release all of them at once. I released them slowly, like drops of rain before a storm becomes thunder. I wanted them to feel every second of the fall. The board called an urgent meeting. I could almost hear the fear from miles away. They questioned my husband for hours. Why were funds missing? Why had major clients left? Why were employees quitting? Why were government inspectors asking questions? He sat in his chair, sweating through his shirt. Lena tried to defend him, but stumbled through lies. Her voice cracked. When they asked about the leaked emails, she froze like a child caught stealing candy. The board members' faces hardened. These were people who cared about money first, loyalty second. And now their money was in danger. My husband tried to blame, internal confusion, but evidence buried him. He paced the room, hands shaking, voice rising. It did not help. One member finally said, "This is unacceptable leadership." In that moment, I knew the stage was ready. They were desperate for someone strong enough to fix the mess. Someone they had underestimated. Someone they had erased. When I walked into the boardroom, every head turned. Some gasped. My husband stood, eyes wide, face draining to ash. "Grace," he whispered like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't sit. I placed a folder on the table and pushed it toward them. Inside were documents showing I was the majority shareholder, proof from the warehouse files, plus the shares I had quietly purchased. The board members flipped through the pages with growing shock. One asked, "Is this real?" I nodded. My husband grabbed the papers with shaking hands. "This isn't possible," he stammered. She resigned. "You filed a fake resignation," I said calmly. His mouth opened, but no words came. I looked at the board and said, "I call for a leadership vote." Every member raised their hand. Unanimous. My husband sank into his chair like a man falling through water. I finally sat in my old seat, my rightful seat. And the revenge had only just begun. The vote ended, and the room grew still. I felt the weight of power settle around me like an old coat I had forgotten I owned. I stood and looked at every board member. "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady and clear. My husband tried to speak, but his mouth trembled. "Grace, we can talk about this," he said. I turned toward him slowly. "No," I replied. "You talked enough when you pushed me out." His eyes filled with panic. Lena stood behind him, pale as paper. I picked up a small bell from the table, a thing the board used to open meetings. I rang it once. As CEO, I now call for removal of Brightworks' acting president. Hands rose again. Another unanimous vote. My husband dropped into his chair like his legs had given up. Lena gasped, whispering his name, but no one cared. The walls felt warmer, brighter, stronger. I felt my heartbeat in my fingertips. The power he stole had come home. Lena tried to speak, but her voice shook too much. She stepped forward, hands lifted like she expected mercy. Grace, please.
I didn't know everything, she said.
Her eyes were wide and wet. She looked young, too young for the game she had played. You forged invoices, I said. You took kickbacks. You lied to clients. You helped destroy the business I built. She opened her mouth again, but a security guard appeared at the door. I nodded to him. He stepped beside her, waiting. She shook her head, then turned angry. He told me you were done, she cried. He said you were old. I smiled a thin smile. Then let this be a lesson, I said softly. Never take advice from a sinking ship. The guard escorted her out past me. She didn't look at my face, only at the floor. The same floor she once ordered people to mop. Justice felt calm, not loud. Cold, but clean. The next week became a whirlwind. I sat in my office, my real office, and reviewed every line of the books. It was worse than expected.
Fraud.
Hidden debts. Secret deals. Fake vendors. Layers of mess that smelled like rot. I fired 3 executives on the first day. For more on the second. Some begged. Some blamed others. Some cried. I didn't flinch. I hired old workers who knew honesty. I fixed the payroll. I rebuilt training. I cleaned the company from top to bottom, like deep spring cleaning. Every corner felt lighter with each truth uncovered. Workers smiled when they saw me in the halls. People whispered that the company felt alive again. I attended meeting after meeting, restoring what he broke. I worked late and went home tired, but proud. This time, the company's future stood on my terms, not his. And the world was beginning to watch the fall of the man who once thought he could erase me. 3 days later, I signed a letter with my full name, Grace Marin Holt, and handed it to HR. Deliver this to him, I said. The woman nodded and rushed out. My ex-husband received it in his small temporary office. I heard later that he opened it with a confused look. Inside, the letter read, "Effective immediately, your position has been reassigned to custodial services pending investigation." He read it twice, thinking it was a joke. HR explained it was real. He shouted, slammed the desk, demanded the board.
But the board backed me.
All of them. The same people he once bragged about controlling. He was told to report to the janitorial closet at 6 a.m. Monday. He had no choice. When I heard he showed up wearing a wrinkled shirt and shaking with rage, I closed my eyes and breathed in slow. He wanted to reduce me. Instead, he learned what real reduction looked like. By Wednesday morning, a video hit the internet. Someone had filmed him mopping the front lobby, head down, shoulders tight, face red. The caption read, "How the mighty fall." It spread fast. Thousands watched, then millions. People laughed. Some cheered. Some commented that they always knew something was off about him. Others praised Clean Core and Brightworks' new leadership. I watched the video alone in my office. I did not laugh. I did not cry. I felt something calmer, like closure knocking softly. He had taken everything from me, my seat, my work, my place in the world. Now he stood where he had forced others to stand, cleaning floors he once walked across like a king. I turned off the video and opened my laptop to finish rebuilding policies. The world could enjoy the drama. I cared only about one thing: justice served clean and cold. And this was only the beginning of his fall. My phone buzzed all morning with calls from reporters. They wanted quotes, comments, statements. They wanted to know how a company founder returned and rebuilt everything after being pushed out. Talk shows used phrases like poetic justice and the rise of Grace Holt. I watched one segment where a host said, "She didn't just survive, She cleaned house. I smiled at that. Clean house, yes, I had. Workers at Brightworks seemed proud again, walking with straighter backs. Some even brought me coffee just to say thank you. I accepted each cup with a warm smile. I never needed the world's attention, but now the spotlight shined on truth, not lies. The social videos of him mopping floors only grew larger. People made jokes and memes. One clip showed me speaking at the expo next to a picture of him pushing a mop. The caption read, "Leadership versus ego." The world took sides, and for the first time, they chose me. Late one night, I walked through the quiet hallway of Brightworks. The air felt cooler, cleaner. I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, he stood there, my ex-husband, holding a mop like a soldier holds a broken weapon. His face was tight with shame and anger. "Are you enjoying this?" he asked, voice shaking. I studied him. This was the man who once spoke for me, over me, and against me. Now he stood in the shadows, smaller than I remembered. "Every second," I said softly. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just truth. He looked at me like he wanted to argue, but the fight had left his eyes. "You could have just walked away," he whispered. "You could have left me with something." I stepped closer. "I did," I said. "I left you the one job you never respected." His grip tightened on the mop handle. Silence filled the hallway. I turned and walked away without looking back. When the investigation ended, the results were clear. He had approved false invoices, pushed money into fake accounts, and signed off on shady deals. He faced real charges now: embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of company funds. The district office sent papers to Brightworks asking for cooperation. My lawyer looked at me across the table. "You can push for maximum charges," he said. Or, I nodded. I already knew. I asked for one thing: a public admission of guilt. No hiding. No quiet settlement. No gentle exit. He had to stand before cameras and speak the truth. When he agreed, I watched him on the small TV in my office. He read the statement with trembling hands. "I misused company funds. I betrayed the trust of my team and of my wife." The words were small, flat, broken. When the camera clicked off, I felt no joy, only completion. The chapter had closed. Once Brightworks stood steady again, I turned my focus to building something better. I created a new training program inside the company, a path to help women rise into leadership positions. I named it the Bright Women Initiative. Young workers cried when they heard the announcement. Older workers hugged me. "You're giving us what you never got," one woman said. I nodded. "Yes," I answered. "And more." We set up classes, mentorship sessions, and pay scale reviews. I wanted women to grow strong before someone tried to push them aside. I wanted no one to fight the battle I fought alone. The company began to shine again: new contracts, new smiles, new purpose. And everywhere I walked, women lifted their heads a little higher. It felt like the right kind of power. Not revenge. Not anger. Something deeper. Something good. I finally understood that my story wasn't just about what had been taken. It was also about what I could give back. A month later, a TV crew arrived to interview me. Bright lights filled my office again, but this time I felt calm, strong. The host asked about the takeover, the scandal, and how I rebuilt. I answered simply, honestly. Then she asked, "What would you say is the biggest lesson you learned?" I looked right at the camera. Sometimes the cleanup has to start at the top. The crew froze for a second, then smiled. They knew a great line when they heard one. Later, that clip spread across the internet. People posted it with clapping emojis. Women wrote messages saying I inspired them. I read every note. It felt strange, being seen like this after being invisible for so long. But it felt right. My story was no longer about him. Not at all. It was about rebuilding, rising, and showing the world that age and kindness did not mean weakness, they meant strength. One morning, as I walked through the lobby, I saw Mr. Daniels, the old janitor my husband used to mock. He was gentle, slow-moving, and always kind. He tipped his hat when he saw me. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I hope you can forgive him someday." His words surprised me. People usually wanted justice, not mercy. I looked at his tired face and thought about the years he had worked unseen. I already forgave him, I said. That's why he's holding a mop and not my heart. Mr. Daniels smiled, a warm, simple smile. It reminded me why I had kept fighting, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been pushed aside. My ex-husband passed behind us then, head down, pushing a mop bucket.
He didn't look at me.
He didn't look at anyone. His world had become small. Mine had grown wide again. I walked away with light steps, feeling the weight of the past drift off my shoulders. But humiliation wears on a man faster than age. After weeks of cleaning floors and emptying bins, he finally broke. HR called me one afternoon. He resigned, they said. Effective immediately. I nodded, not surprised. He couldn't stand seeing people who once feared him now walk past him without noticing. He packed his things quietly, no speech, no drama. He left through the side door, the one workers used. I watched from my office window. He didn't glance back at the building he once tried to steal. For a moment, I felt a tiny ache, not for him, but for the years I wasted believing he stood beside me. Then the ache passed. I returned to my desk, to my charts and plans. His chapter in my story was done. I would not let a single regret steal the joy I had rebuilt. My company lived again. My name lived again. And I still had work to do. As Clean Core grew stronger, we began merging services with the newly restored Brightworks. Two companies, once torn apart by pride, now stood side by side under one vision, my vision. We trained workers, raised wages, improved health plans, and brought back old clients who trusted my leadership. Revenue tripled in a single quarter. Newspapers called it the Great Rebuild. I walked through the new shared headquarters with quiet pride. People smiled when they saw me. Some clapped softly. Some said thank you. Clean Core's blue uniforms mixed with Brightworks' green ones, a sea of colors moving with purpose. The company was no longer broken. It was alive again. And so was I. When my name appeared on magazine covers with a headline Strategy, Strength, and Second Chances, I felt a calm warmth fill my chest. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was legacy. And it was mine. At the company's anniversary gala, hundreds of workers gathered under bright lights and silver streamers. Music played softly. The air smelled like flowers and hope. When I stepped on stage, the crowd grew quiet. I looked at all the faces, young, old, tired, proud. Thank you, I said, for standing with me, for believing in honesty, for rebuilding what others tried to break. Applause rose like a wave. I lifted my hands to calm it. Great empires aren't destroyed by enemies, I said. They're rebuilt by survivors. The room erupted. People stood. Some wiped tears. I felt my throat tighten. After everything, every betrayal, every insult, every quiet morning alone, here I was, standing tall, standing whole. And when the music started again, workers crowded around me, asking for pictures, hugs, memories. I let myself enjoy every second. I had earned this moment. I had fought for it. And I had won. Late that night, after the gala ended, I walked down the quiet hallway. The lights were dim, the building resting. As I passed the janitorial closet, I heard a small radio playing an old tune. A man hummed along, soft and off-key. I paused. Through the cracked door, I saw my ex-husband's reflection in a small mirror. He wiped down a mop handle slowly, tired but calm. For a moment, we just stood there, divided by a door and a lifetime of choices. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a single coin, and dropped it gently into his cleaning bucket. The sound echoed in the quiet hall. He looked up, confused. I smiled, a peaceful, final smile. Don't spend it all in one place, I said. Then I turned and walked away, heels clicking like a closing book. The lights faded behind me. My story was complete. And justice was clean. Please follow for more great stories. Thank you for watching.